I must move on to BBC Pay, the other big story of the day.
I thought you were going to, yes.
Yes. You'll have seen the letter from all my female colleagues to the BBC's Director General. What is your message to the BBC about that?
I would sign the letter with them. I think the BBC needs to look very hard at itself. The point you made in the press discussion earlier about the treatment of older women in the BBC is, I think, a very important one. But also this gender pay gap is appalling. We would insist on a strong gender pay audit of every organisation, and we'd also look at a 20-to-1 ratio between the chief executive and the lowest paid staff in every public sector organisation. And the BBC is very much public sector.
The pay ratio might have a big effect on sort of famous actors like Benedict Cumberbatch and people who at the moment BBC licence payers want to see in top-level dramas and films made by the BBC. Would the 20-to-1 pay ratio affect people like that?
If he's employed directly by the BBC, yes. If he's employed by somebody else, that's a contractual matter between the BBC and somebody else. But I do think the BBC, which is a wonderful organisation, and I actually support it, I support the renewal of the Charter, I think it needs to look at itself, because the levels of pay are quite astronomical. The pay gap, rather, is astronomical.
And do you think that there needs to be more legislation on the pay gap across the piece?
Absolutely. We need to have a gender pay audit done in every company. We need strong imposition of equal pay legislation across the piece. There's about a 20% gender pay gap in Britain, but there's also the question of promotion of women, and it's not just at the top level. That gets all the news. The BBC gets all the news, big companies get all the news. What about those working in the National Health Service, those working in local government, those working in small companies where the women know they're being paid less than a man doing more or less equally the same job? That's the area of discrimination that is so serious within our society, and often the loss of women's career progression opportunities when they take time out for having children in their late 20s or 30s, come back and suddenly find the man they've been working alongside a year before has shot up the scale somewhere else and they're left behind.